Hello, it's Mo. Today I have a book in front of me, Stolen by Pan. It's by Jessi Ramey. I have not read this yet, but I'm friends with her cousin. She did not ask me to do this. I've been wanting to read a chapter out loud on this channel for a while, but of course there's all sorts of copyright laws, and I didn't want to get into the legality, but I have her permission. To read a little bit. So, Stolen by Pan is in reference to Peter Pan, which I'm pretty sure everyone is familiar with. But if you're not, there are a lot of literature and movies on the subject, so this one does seem to go against the typical portrayal of Peter Pan, and you'll see what I mean when I get into it. So I think the premise or the idea is unique. So I'm going to flip through it a few times. So the cover looks like there's got a little hand, and perhaps that's fairy dust. And of course you have all the leaves representing the forest in Neverland. And a sword or a dagger, hard to tell size. You've got the stars, because of course, what is it? First star on the right and straight on till morning or something like that. And then of course you have the hook. Captain Hook. So I'm just going to read a little bit. I hope you get cozy and settle in to just listening to the sound of my voice as I read you a little bit of a not so bedtime story. The traditional plot is a bedtime story, I suppose, but first of all, there's no way I could get through this in one bedtime. But this one does seem to be, without giving it away, and again, I have not read, but it's a little bit darker than the happy-go-lucky Peter Pan that we are used to. So on the back, it has a picture of the author. Her name again is Jessie, and it says Jessie is from North Carolina, which is where I am, and has loved the story of Peter Pan since she was 4. In her free time, she likes to read or spend time with family and friends. So, let's go ahead and open it. So, this is the prologue. Tiger Lily's Warning. That's the heading. It is a quiet night in Neverland. The Jolly Roger is anchored offshore on the east side of the island, and Captain Hook paces his quarters, swinging a medallion necklace between his fingers, while his crew of pirates finishes up their daily chores on the deck. Mermaids lay on the ocean floor, drifting off to sleep as the moon reflects through the waves above them, and lost boys run through the forest, laughing as they chase each other, paying no mind to the unknowns prowling in the shadows. Tiger Lily sits in front of a dim fire, her waist-length black hair swept behind her shoulders and her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. She is not frightened as she sits in the heart of the campsite, a place where most do not survive long enough to count the tents. Peter Pan sits across from her. His emerald eyes are focused and stern. He runs his hand through the waves of his hair as he tries to absorb the information she's just told him. The short flames dance between them as crickets chirp in the distance. Tiger Lily's eyes stay trained on the dagger Peter is fidgeting with in his hands, still stained with the blood of a pirate from an encounter earlier that day. "A girl?" Peter asks, and she merely nods her head once. The flames rise along with their volume of his air. "Where is she?" Tiger Lily remains unfazed by his harsh tone. She is used to Pan being cruel to her. It is nothing to take personally. He treats everyone poorly. One is lucky if it is not only his words that slice them. "The mainland. Her name is Kit." He scoffs in disbelief. "You're telling me that a girl from the mainland is destroying my island?" "She's not what you think, Pan. She's controlling the entire island without realizing it. She's powerful." Her tone begs him to be patient, but his anger blinds him. The boy stands and paces back and forth, the gears in his mind turning. His boots kick up dust, and Tiger Lily begins to regret doing Pan this favor. "I'll handle it," he says suddenly, and an uneasiness settles deep in Tiger Lily's stomach. "We need to wait and see if it gets worse. You can't rush into this." "You said yourself it's becoming more evident." His intensity causes her to blink, but she knows better than to flinch. As if on cue, thunder rumbles in the distance. Both of them pause as they wait for the sound to fade away. Tiger Lily speaks before he can. She has no idea we exist, We are nothing but fairy tales to her. I'm warning you. If you rush into this, it could harm everyone on the island. You need to tread lightly. Peter snaps his head in her direction, and the flames rise in temperature. Tiger Lily, you know I won't hurt you, but that doesn't apply to your family. So I recommend you tread lightly. We've discussed this. She's a danger to Neverland. You can't expect me to change the plan now that we found out it's a girl. They both stare at each other for several moments, the fine line between friendship and rivalry beginning to blur. You've given me the information I asked for, and I thank you for it. Now, get out of my campsite. He waves her away as if she's nothing but a young child. Tiger Lily does not protest. She knows if she talks back, it could put her family in danger. Instead, she bites her tongue and narrows her eyes before disappearing into the darkness of the forest. Once she is out of sight, Peter sends a whistle across the island. As it echoes, it morphs from a whistle into the sound of an eagle. Within moments, the lost boy of Peter's choice steps out from among the shadows. His dark brown eyes nearly blend in with his black skin, and his long legs carry him easily to Pan's side. A sword hangs limply by his side, ready to be used at any moment. You called? He hums as he ambles into the campsite. I'm going to be gone for a while, Lex. You're in charge until I return. Lex knew this would be the command as soon as he heard the eagle's call. Pan and Tiger Lily had been meeting too often, and Neverland had been acting more unusual than normal lately. It all started the day an unexpected thunderstorm rolled over the island. There were never thunderstorms in Neverland. From that point on, it had been as if the island had been throwing a temper tantrum. It was only a matter of time before Pan figured out what was going on. Where are you going? Lex asks plainly as he takes the open seat Tiger Lily had left behind. Peter Pan wipes the dried blood from his blade as a new game formulates in his mind. I'm going to go solve a problem. So that's the prologue. Intriguing. I'm going to read one more chapter here. Here it is. So I'm skipping quite a few chapters. So some things have been going on, but I'm not going to tell you what they are. This is the perspective from the girl, Kit, that they were just talking about. Chapter 6, Proof. We walk along the forest trail in silence. I stare at the ground, trying to avoid tripping over the roots. It's so dark, I am not sure how he moves, he as in Pan, with such ease through the trees. It's as if he knows where every rock rests and where every root peeks out. My foot moves much slower and more hesitantly than his. Every few minutes he stops and he waits for me to catch up. As far as I can tell, there is no one out here but us. I expected to pass someone, anyone, but I can only hear the sound of birds chirping and the bugs humming. Where could we have possibly gone to this far into a forest? This is one of those situations they make documentaries about. Children living in the forest, pretending as if the outside world doesn't exist. Can I at least use a phone to call home? My mom is probably worried sick, I ask. He scoffs. There are no phones in Neverland. If you were to say that to anyone else on the island, they would have no clue as to what you are talking about, he explains, completely amused. How long will he keep up that this is Neverland and Peter Pan? If you're Peter Pan, then I want to see Wendy, or better yet, Tinkerbell, I call out. The boy in the green's pace slows. I'm sorry to ruin your fairy tale, but there's no Wendy here. And as for Tinkerbell, she's not around anymore. I roll my eyes. How convenient. Don't worry, I'm going to give you proof. As we go farther, the dirt dampens and the air becomes thicker with humidity. Mud begins to stick to the bottom of my feet, and I wish I had had on sneakers. The sound of waves crashing echoes in the distance. We approach an opening in the trees, and the mist hits my face as we emerge from the woods. He brought me to a rocky beach. It is nothing like I have ever seen before. Waves slam into the rocks, creating loud crashes. The number of stars in the sky indicates that there is no light pollution in this area. It's so vivid and generous that it resembles a painting. My mouth drops a little when I watch 5 or 6 stars shoot across the sky. The moonlight shines on the ripples of the water, showing its rapid movements. It extends far into the black water and merges with the sky. We truly are on an island. He leads me up onto the rocks and sits down by the edge. Water splashes up onto my feet but avoids him perfectly. Not a single drop touches him. When I'm too slow to follow his suit, he reaches up and grabs my sleeve to pull me down beside him. The aggressive motion startles me. Don't touch me, I protest, scooting away. Shut up, will you? He snaps. Then he leans forward over his knees to look down at the water. The harshness of his tone shocks me. Without saying anything else, he reaches his hand out, and the stillness spreads across the water, the restless ocean now acting like an undisturbed lake. If I didn't know better, I would say that the ocean is obeying him. I cannot believe my eyes as the monstrous waves are now replaced with water that is so smooth it could be mistaken for glass. How is that possible? I think out loud. Before he can respond, there is a splash in the distance. A groove in the water makes its way towards us. No ripples cascade around it. My mouth hangs open in anticipation as a head gracefully emerges from the water. Her eyes are the first thing I notice. They glow through the darkness. Their color is so bright I cannot decipher it. Her dark hair emerges into the black water effortlessly. It's sleek and beautiful. It's impossible to tell where her hair ends and the ocean begins. Her appearance is enticing and captivating, but also terrifying. I pull my knees up, distancing myself from this new stranger. She looks back and forth between me and the boy. Where did she come from? Pan, what brings you here? Her voice is smooth yet shattering. He only offers her an innocent shrug over his shoulders. I guess you could say I missed you. His voice charms her. The blush on her face glows pink. Her eyes travel to meet mine, and I muster an awkward smile. You've brought another girl. Her eyes narrow as her chin drops into the water. I hold on to my knees tighter, trying to compact myself away. It makes no sense how she appeared out of nowhere. Kit, why don't you shake her hand? Can't be impolite, can we? He instructs me as if we were at a formal gathering. I raise my eyebrow, and he nods his head towards the lady as if to say, go on. My hand shakes uncontrollably as I reach out towards her. The water remains still when she reaches forward and grasps onto my outstretched hand. An alarmed gasp bursts out of me when I feel the slimy scales that cover the length of her body that were not visible from the neck down. Her nails lengthen into claws across my hand, giving her a better grip. She presses them against my wrist and I scream. I'm certain that she could rip my skin like paper if she wants to. I try to take my arm back, but she strengthens her grip and pulls me towards her. A horrible hissing sound comes from her mouth and her teeth sharpen to a point. I stand to my feet to provide myself more stability as I fight against her. She grabs onto me with her other hand and continues to try to pull me in. Peter stands beside me and watches us for a couple of seconds as I scream and frantically try to yank away. It's only when my feet begin to slip off the rock when he decides to step in and pull me away from her. He simply pulls me back once, and that's all it takes to break her hold. The woman hisses at the two of us, revealing her razor teeth and gills on her neck. As she throws herself back into the sea, a massive fishtail extends into the air and splashes water back onto me. I stare at the spot where she disappeared from and scream again. It echoes all the way back into the trees. His hand quickly clamps over my mouth and the other supports the back of my head so I can't pull away. "Be quiet," he barks. I look up at Peter and my breathing becomes uneven and rushed when my eyes lock with his. My chest feels like it might combust. "Don't scream," he orders. I nod and he takes his hand away from my mouth. As soon as he steps away, I turn and sprint back across the rocks and into the forest. He shouts after me, but the sound of his voice only makes me run faster. Did I just see a mermaid? This must be a dream. That's the only reasonable explanation. It is some crazy, lucid dream that is pulling in elements of what happened to me earlier tonight before I went to bed. The prom theme was Neverland, so that explains why I'm in the world of Peter Pan. Marcus turned out to be somebody I didn't expect. That's why Peter Pan is mean and the furthest thing away from childlike. Lily betrayed me. That's why I almost was drowned by a mermaid. But if this is a dream, why can't I feel every branch cut my skin and my lungs burn with exhaustion the further I run? It feels too real to be a dream. I'm not sure where I'm running to, but I want to be as far away from here as possible. Vines and branches whip across my face as I race away from the trail and through the thickness of the trees. It does not help that a storm rolls in overhead. The low rumble thunder sound sounds like a monster prowling through the trees. I run into a clearing and the lush greenery stops within a single stride. The comfortable forest air aggressively turns stale. Glistening white snow covers the ground and trees behind me. My breath creates a cloud that expands into the night. This isn't possible. Behind me, there is a clear line where the snow stops and the thick green grass begins. I take a few steps back into the grass and the temperature immediately rises again to comfortable and warm. I reach across into the winter as snowflakes begin to fall and it starts to drizzle on the summer side. Where am I? I whisper to myself as I watch the snowflakes hit my palm and rain trickles down my hair. Neverland. His voice speaks from behind my shoulder. Peter is standing inches away from me as if he appeared from thin air. The rain does not touch him. He looks up at the sky and rain fades away. How did he catch up to me so quickly? He grabs my wrist before I have time to process all my thoughts, and a cloud of smoke swirls around us. It is dark and thick. My head becomes light and dizzy. It feels like all the weight is being lifted from my body while I spin in tight circles. When the smoke clears, torches surround us again. Boys sit at the fire, the weapons laid across the ground. We are back at the campsite. The same camp it took up to 30 minutes to walk away from, we have returned to in the blink of an eye. I stumble away from him, and I absorb my new surroundings. I turn in circles to make sure I am not imagining the change in scenery. The spins do not help my dizziness, so I stop and face him. You're Peter Pan. There's no way I can deny what just happened. I asked for proof, and he gave it to me without hesitation or reservation. Yes, he answers while remaining where he is. I blink several times and look around, finally realizing where I truly am. A place I have only read about in children's books. A land I was always told is fake and created by a man with an outrageous imagination. We're in Neverland. Yes. I just saw a mermaid. Yes. And she's one of the nicer ones, Peter says while resting a hand on his dagger. My attention goes directly to the weapons leaning against the trees and laying on the ground. A black-haired boy picks up one of the swords and half-heartedly swings it at another boy passing by. The boy curses as he dodges the blade, but the sword barely nicks his arm, and a small trail of blood trickles out. The black-haired boy only laughs and throws the sword aside like a used toy, and the boy with the cut on his arm rolls his eyes and wipes the rest of the blood away like it's a normal occurrence. My stomach churns. All these boys seem incredibly dangerous now. These are not the lost boys I have grown up learning about. They aren't dressed in animal costumes or singing catchy tunes. They're cloaked in dark hoods and have glares that slice through me like they're weapons. The Peter Pan standing in front of me does not have an inviting smile or a cute fairy flying on his shoulder. He has not showed me an ounce of kindness and definitely has not offered to play a game of treasure hunt. He is not the innocent boy or the sweet 12-year-old boy I had imagined him to be. He is a teenager with a blood-stained dagger and a fire in his eyes that leads me to believe everything I learned about him was a lie. My body suddenly feels like it's made of stone. My head aches and the edges of my vision blur. I might pass out. This cannot be happening. This is happening. His smirk seems more sinister now as he takes slow, steady steps towards me. Thunder roars in the distance as if it's telling me to run. "Are you ready to listen to me now?" he asks. I nod my head, not being able to form words. So definitely not the same story that we all know. One of the paragraphs from that chapter is on the back of the book. That's why I picked that chapter to read. I hope you are all cozy and snug and ready to drift off to sleep. And hopefully your dreams are not disturbed by a malicious Peter Pan. Sleep well, my friend.